And we're live.
That might go.
That's your go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is the Libertarian Party of Texas candidate highlight. I'm Amanda Gibbs, and I've got my co-host here, Nathan Polsky. And today we are featuring Mr. Bob King.
Hey, Amanda. Hey, Nathan. How are y'all today?
Doing well on yourself?
Doing great. Super.
Great.
So we'll get into like the very first hard-hitting question. Can you tell us who you are and what you're running for?
Okay, I'll do my best at that. So my name is Bob King. I'm a native Texan. I'm an Episcopalian. I'm an independent minded libertarian. I call myself a constitutional libertarian because I believe in the rule of law. I'm a former energy industry exec and chief financial officer. So I come from the banking and finance industry. And the past 15 years of my career, I started a second career as a nonprofit executive and leader. And so I've had really two careers. And then I basically retired upon the onset of COVID and with the intent of never getting into politics. But recently, I've just gotten so twisted off at the situation that I had to do something about it. And so that's sort of why I'm here. I'm 63 years old. I'm running for the United States Congress in Texas 21st District against the Republican incumbent Chip Roy.
I've seen Chip Roy's been pretty prominent in the media recently.
Well, he's never met a microphone he doesn't like, that's for sure. We can all speculate on what his long-term motives are. Getting things done at the Texas border is not one of them. Being a faithful servant of the country and accomplishing what needs to be done is not one of them. I suspect he is like the great majority of congressmen who believe that they will one day be senators. And I believe that's really what he's doing right now.
Gotcha. Well, what inspired you to run?
Well, my main inspiration is these two pictures over my shoulder here. My sons are aged 34 and 31, and I'm very distressed at the state of the country that we're leaving them. And so that's the main thing. I'm disgusted at any real long-term thinking, the lack of long-term thinking that's going on in our government right now. It's just, what do we have to do to win the next election? And that's causing, of course, the two major parties to polarize themselves and create this situation in which nothing gets done. Of course, they don't want anything to do with any third parties, and the only thing they find in common really is that A, they want to stay in power, and B, they want to make sure that anybody like us doesn't get anywhere near power. And so really, I've always been interested in politics, but my desire to get into it is really just driven by a disgust factor. The choices at the top being really bad. And in my opinion, the choices here in Texas 21, likewise, being a pretty good mirror of what's going on at the top.
Well, I know that you have been a really good supporter of the candidates that we do run in Texas. At least last time, you helped a whole lot with Mark Tippett. And just as someone who was on his campaign, I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it, and I really, really liked Mark and found him to be, what we need, people who just see themselves as regular citizens who want to get in there for a time and do their duty and try to fix some problems. And yeah, we all, everybody brings their ideological direction to it. And that's a good thing. We need to have an ideological bent and we need to be fairly predictable as to what we're going to stand for. But having said that, we can't let the extremists of our ideology get in the way of the main point, which is we got problems as a country and we got to solve them. And invariably, the way our government's been set up, there's going to have to be some compromise in order to get things done. And I'm not opposed to that. But I do think that there's one area that is so so off the rails that we really can't continue to compromise the way we have been, and that's the excess spending of money, the growth of government, the fact that we're running a $1 to $2 trillion deficit every year without a declared war, without a pandemic actively going on, but yet we're still spending all that money. And to be honest, neither party wants to fix it. I remember when I was younger, the concept of the third rail of politics. You couldn't touch Social Security because it was electrified, and anybody who touched it was killed, right? To me, I think what's going on is that's happening with almost the entire budget. Almost anything that you suggest that needs to be trimmed, there's going to be some constituency that's going to come after you, like you're the bad guy who pushed the grandma off the cliff in her wheelchair. And that has caused, I think, the Republican Party to fail miserably in its mission of being fiscally disciplined. And of course, you can never expect the Democrats to be fiscally disciplined. That goes against their entire concept. So I really have lost faith in the Republican Party in the last 10 to 15 years, really since George W. Bush. I've been a libertarian. I've been a big admirer of Ron Paul. I certainly voted for Gary Johnson when he ran. I voted for Joe Jorgensen last time around. I certainly couldn't vote for Donald Trump under any circumstances.
Take the guns first, right?
Right.
Well, what are some of your priorities? So when Bob King wins and you get into office, what are some of the key priorities that you have?
Well, so, I think there's sort of three major issues affecting the electorate. One issue that the Republicans want to focus on, of course, being the border.
Mm-hmm.
One that the Democrats want to focus on, that being abortion. And the one that I want to focus on, which is the budget. The Democrats and Republicans don't want to touch that because they might be responsible for having to make adult decisions, which are going to be painful. So I think that the budget is the main issue because what we're doing, it's beyond just the effect it has on the economy. So economists will tell you that these deficits are creating inflation, they're creating higher interest rates. That's making your Big Mac meal at lunch go from being $6 to $11. That's making it very difficult for young people to be able to get into a house. That whole American dream thing is really at risk for entire generations of people. And I say that as one of the younger, I say boomers. I was born in 1961, so I'm at the end of the boom. But the boomers have just consumed everything. And since we have y'all's credit card and y'all don't seem to be stopping us from spending, I think the boomers are continuing to spend. So really, that's my number one thing. I do think on the border and on abortion, there are what I would consider to be moderate solutions that would solve those problems to the satisfaction of 70 to 80% of Americans. Now, there's always going to be 10% on the extremes. They're the ones that are controlling the two major parties right now, and they're not going to be happy. They don't want those solutions, but I think the vast majority of Americans do. If we could solve abortion, if we could solve the border, and I could go into each of those later if you want me to, then we could focus on the hard thing. And the hard thing is going to be to wrestle down this budget and get us to where we're, again, learning how to operate within our own, a reasonable tax base. And right now there is just no governor on our spending. So, that would be my number one focus. And I would go through every single department. There would be no sacred cows. We would have I would say, a goal of cutting a minimum of 20% from every single budget of every single department. I think there are some departments that need to be eliminated. I don't see any reason for a Department of Energy. I don't see any reason for a Department of Education. Libertarians, of course, could add many departments on that list. I just find those to be the two most egregious wastes of money. But what I really think we need to do, and one of the things that caused me to be angry enough to run for Congress myself, is we've got to destroy the Washington-centric culture that we have allowed to develop around this behemoth of a federal government. About a few months ago, I looked at an article about the 10 most wealthy counties in America. It was in Travel and Leisure, for crying out loud. So I expected it to be, Key Biscayne and Nantucket and Malibu and places like that, maybe Carmel by the Sea in California, but no, 5 of the top 10 most affluent counties as measured by median income are suburbs of Washington, D.C., 4 of them in Northern Virginia and 1 of them in Maryland. And, and actually number 1 and number 2 are both suburbs of DC, and then 3 of the next 8. So, Loudoun County, Virginia is number 1. That just happens, by the way, to be the county that Chip Roy is from. So, which
he's not a Texan?
He's not a Texan. It's amazing.
One on TV.
It certainly does. And when I talk to people on the campaign trail, they're all shocked to learn that he's not a Texan. So he is a good actor, and he does play the Texan, and he's got the y'alls and the howdies and all that stuff down. Mm-hmm. But he was brought to Texas by Ted Cruz. He was Ted Cruz's fixer when Cruz first ran for the Senate, and I'm sure Ted said, "Hey, Lamar Smith is retiring, and Texas 21 is available. Why don't you move down here and take it over?" So once we get rid of him, one way or the other, he's not staying here. He's going back home to D.C. where he lives, where he'll be a lobbyist, where he'll cash in, even more than he already has. So, yeah, that's, I think, a big surprise to most people is that Chip's not a Texan. So, anyway, to get back to my point, when you see that 5 of the 10 most wealthy communities in the country are suburbs of D.C., it tells you that we're being robbed. The rest of the country is being robbed by Washington, D.C., and they're taking their clip and they're living high on the hog, and they have better salaries than their private sector, equivalents, and they have better benefits, and then their kids are going to go to Georgetown, and they're going to get an internship with the senator, and it creates this perpetuation of power in this lording over us class of people in D.C. And so what I want to do is not only shrink these departments, I want to disperse them. There is no reason that these departments anymore should be headquartered in D.C. We have Zoom, we have other things. The whole rest of the world has learned to live electronically, and there is no reason, with the possibility. I mean, I wouldn't move the Pentagon. I probably wouldn't move the State Department. I probably wouldn't move Justice, but everything else should be somewhere else. And, the government, if it were thinking like a business, it would create a relocation process whereby groups of cities would be invited to bid on these departments, and the government would take the best bid. And, we'd end up cutting the bureaucracy in half, because almost none of those DC people would move to, if we said, okay, IRS, your headquarters is now in Bismarck, North Dakota, and we'll be happy to move you to Bismarck, North Dakota, and you can continue with your job, or we can pay you out of the 50% of your pension that you've earned, and you can retire, and then we don't have to replace them. Well, guess what? They're not going to retire, because if we're doing this all at once, they ain't going to be able to sell their house. So I don't see why 96 senators out of 100 would not be in favor of the dispersing of all the power out of Washington. But there is an answer to why 96 of the 100 do not want this. And that's because, guess what? They live there too. And that's the problem. So, I mean, I understand why Virginia and Maryland wouldn't like this, but still, we need to do it, because this idea that our whole country is being lorded over by this clique of people who are so centric to this one part of the country. Let's just say Boston to New York to DC and all their Ivy League schools and law firms and whatnot. And it's a big problem. And so that's part of the solution, I think, to the budget is not just blowing up the bureaucracy, but dispersing it.
Okay, so how do you plan to engage with and represent the diverse interests of your constituents?
Well,
like not just the people who agree with you.
Yeah, well, so I do think that the job of a congressman or woman is to lay out principles and then address each issue as it relates to my principles. So if somebody doesn't agree with my principles, then obviously they're going to vote against me, and should, right? So it is not the job of a congressman to stick his finger in the air on every issue and say, how do my constituents feel? A congressperson should know instinctively where his or her district stands on most things. But to answer your question, I think, what I'm doing in the campaign is I have a ground game set up in 12 different locations around our district. District 21 is spread out among 10 counties in Texas. So it's pretty big. Although about 40% of it is the northern part of Bexar County, the northern part of San Antonio, essentially. And then the rest of it is all over the hill country. And so I'm going every month, like tomorrow I'm going to Blanco. Tonight I'm going to Alamo Heights. I'll be in, later this week, I'll be in Wimberley. Last week I was in Kerrville. And so obviously I live in New Braunfels, and San Marcos is right up the road. So among all these locations, I'm out there every month building, not just for my campaign, but for the libertarian movement. If I'm elected, I'm going to continue to do that. I won't be, I'll be doing more conference calls, of course, than personal visits, but I'll certainly commit to being in each of those 12 locations once a year. And the other thing I want to do is have a sort of a weekly type of conference call that I would have moderated by a real bona fide journalist asking me real bona fide questions, and not having it be a PR event. So, I think the constituent need to know where I'm coming from. I certainly need to listen to what they have to say. Other thing is that I'm a big believer in term limits. I've taken the term limit pledge. And so I will only be there a maximum of 3 terms. So they're going to have to be finding a replacement for me too, much sooner than is normal. So I hope that answers that question. That I do think that it's important that I listen, but it's also equally important that I lead.
So once you get elected, you get to start training your replacement.
Well, yeah. So I've got some ideas, but we need to have. I really think the Texas Hill Country is a perfect place for the libertarian movement, because people don't want to be messed with.
Right.
That porcupine behind you, Amanda, it says a lot. When I go to farmers markets and things like that, frequently I start by asking people, who's your congressman? And of course, more than half of the people don't know who their congressman is, which is kind of sad. But they all want to know, what the heck is that porcupine? And I say, it's one of the coolest things in our party, because it's a perfect illustration of what we're about. We just want to be left alone and and do our thing. But don't mess with us. We'll give you the back of our tail.
Well, so I know you're running against Chip Roy. Is there a Democrat that's also running? And
there is. Her name is Kristen Hook. She's a political novice, and I have yet to meet her. She's got a PhD in human biology from an Ivy League school. I'm sure she's an incredibly bright person. She's there because the Democrats see this as a losing district. It's 60-40, gerrymandered in favor of the Republican. And so what Democrats are doing nationwide is they're putting women up in districts they cannot win, to emphasize the abortion issue, to help the top of the ticket. That's really what they're doing. And so I look forward to meeting her. but she really is the Biden agenda in a nutshell. She's, I don't want to toot her horn, but she's pretty woke.
So you talked a little bit about it earlier, but what really sets Bob King apart from Chip Roy and the Democrat?
Well, I'm a citizen. I've been a taxpayer for 40 something years. That's that. In one case, that's longer than Chip Roy has, before he was an adolescent and before Kristen Hook was born. I've been a taxpayer. I will not be beholden to any party bosses. One of the great things about being a libertarian, I guess you could say, taking lemons and making lemonade out of it, is that I can agree with Democrats on this issue, and I can go and agree with Republicans on that issue, and I would be a free agent on each particular issue. I just think about how different Congress would be if there were 20 or 25 libertarians who did not care who got the credit for solving the problem. They just said, we're going to do what's right, and that's going to be aligned with principles of freedom. But we don't care if President Biden gets the credit for it. We don't care if Speaker so-and-so gets the credit for it. We just want to do the right thing. And I think that's really what sells today, is that so many people who are habitually bred to vote Democrat or Republican, they're so sick of the entire game, which is just, there's no progress being made towards solutions on anything. And it's all just a giant who gets the credit game. And we saw that just recently, on the border, where the Republicans really had Biden in a corner last fourth quarter, I guess December. And finally, Biden said, Uncle, I'll sign this deal. And the Republicans put Lankford from Oklahoma, who probably is the most conservative of all the 48 Republican senators they have up there, to negotiate the deal. And then as soon as Trump saw a deal was about to get negotiated, he told Chip Roy and other Republicans in the House, don't sign on to this Senate deal. I'd rather not have a solution to the problem. Now, that Senate deal, in some respects, might have been somewhat less good than, the Republicans wanted. But that's the nature of Congress. Especially when you have a divided, like virtually 50-50 type House. So we just saw an example of them not caring about solving the problem, but caring who gets the credit. And I think your question, what sets me apart from those guys, is I won't care who gets the credit for solving a problem. I just want to solve the problem.
Okay, so how would you ensure transparency and accountability in your actions as an elected official? Because I know that is a big topic.
Makes me think I should wear, a body cam like a police officer everywhere I go, right? Well, I think the number one thing I can do is subject myself to regular, independent journalistic questioning of what's going on. And you don't see that happening, of course, with either of the two major parties. It's all propaganda. So I would try to have, weekly, if possible, at least twice a month type of conference calls with the district that, as I said, would be moderated by a real journalist from either, New Braunfels or Kerrville or Bernie or Austin or San Antonio or, wherever. I'd rotate that around and have them ask me questions. I think that in terms of, transparency, obviously, if I'm elected, I'm going to make my tax returns public, all that sort of thing. I've already done the federal disclosure that's required of a federal congressional candidate. So that's already public. But beyond that, I think I would say I'm not doing this to make money. The salary they pay a congressman is probably enough to pay for, an apartment on Capitol Hill or so, not a whole lot more. And so I'm not doing this to make a lot of money. So, I mean, the idea of writing books and all these things that, mysteriously make congressmen become millionaires, I'm going to swear that stuff off or give it. If I did it, I'd certainly give it to charity.
You're
I'm
not
not
going to
doing
use it like a grift?
Well, I mean, look, I'm 63 years old. If I wanted to become a millionaire out of politics, I'd have started this 40 years ago. I'm too old to start a new career to make a mint on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this, because I'm worried about the country. And, I think the Libertarian Party has solutions that will dramatically improve the lives of our children and grandchildren if we can adopt them. And that's what I'm concerned about. I know it's hard to cut the budget because, that one section of haves versus another section of have-nots today are fighting over this pool of money. But we're completely forgetting these generations to follow us. They're getting hosed no matter what. And we have to put our grandchildren's interest into the equation right now. And, it's getting to be so dangerous that we're fortunate that we are the reserve currency of the world and can borrow, but that's not a forever deal. We're rapidly approaching the point at which our currency is going to have a major problem. And when that day happens, our way of life is going to be impacted as much or more than as when the Great Depression hit, when the stock market crashed and the Great Depression hit. And, and of course, the government solution is always more government.
Right.
And
That's
that more
never the
government,
answer.
it's always bringing us closer to the problems, particularly if you're not paying for the government and you're charging it to your grandchildren.
Government needs
So,
more money in order to do better.
yeah. Now, where I probably differ from a lot of libertarians is, I don't, because I'm focused on the budget and the deficit and the grandkids, I don't think the first thing to do is to cut taxes. I think tax cuts should be a reward for spending cuts. And if we can cut spending as deeply as we need to, then maybe we'll have room for tax cuts. I mean, obviously, I think taxes are too high, but that's dwarfed by the government that is being foisted upon us. And so my focus is on bringing that debt down and saving and preserving this country for our grandchildren. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
Well, do you have any specific skills or experience that would make you well suited to this position?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, I come out of the oil and gas industry, the finance side. So, I mean, I understand budgets. I know how to dive into budgets and do the 80-20 rule and find out what is driving this budget. What is causing us to be so far in the red? What's the value of each of these line items relative to the money we're spending? Are we getting a rate of return on these expenditures? These are all things that we instinctively do in the private sector. And so I did that for many years. And I don't think, my opponent, one is Chip is a lawyer and a career political operative. And my Democratic opponent is a biologist. So neither of them really are business people. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. And I would say the number two thing is my second career, I was a nonprofit executive. And this may differentiate me from some libertarians in the sense that I really do believe there are human needs that society needs to take care of. I just happen to think that the government is the worst intermediary to do that. And there are ways to let the private market do those things that would be far more effective, far more efficient, far less costly. And, if we just, for example, told everybody who paid, and I'm just picking a number, said, let's just say you pay more than $100,000 a year in taxes. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's only going to be a small percentage of the country, but it's a large amount of dollars. And say, if you will give money to certain safety net charities of your choosing, okay, we will allow you to credit your those type of contributions against your taxes all the way down to, let's say, $100,000, and that would create a private sector market for capital for nonprofits that would be just unbelievably huge. And I've seen it with my own two eyes. Nonprofits, dollar for dollar, do a far better job of delivering results for their clients. So you asked me, is there anything in my experience that will make me a good representative? I have a sensitivity and a caring for people who are, as Jesus said in Matthew 23, the least of these my brothers. And we have to do something. I do believe that it is incumbent on society to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. Where I disagree with Democrats is I don't find anywhere in that Bible that Jesus said, oh, and you can outsource this to Caesar. Just give Caesar money and he'll do it.
Like, I'm just going to like throw this in here because I tend to be looked at as one of those like, oh, let's help the community. Like, and we are kind of like not necessarily like economics is not my thing, but hearing like the wanting to help the community via nonprofits and people instead of government just kind of warms my heart because that's what motivates me, is because I want the community helped.
Yes, it would work. There would obviously be a transition as we disengage from government programs and amp up the private sector. But the beautiful thing about the private sector is that, and I'm talking about private sector nonprofits, if they screw up, there's an immediate consequence to them screwing up. And that is they lose their funding overnight.
Yep.
If they have a big scandal, let's say, or somebody, they misappropriate money or for some reason their programs fail to deliver results, then their donors will find someplace else to give their money. That is not what happens with government programs. In fact, the opposite happens with government programs. When government programs fail, they just use it as an excuse to ask for more money, and Congress gives it to them. Mm-hmm. And so I have a huge amount of being a sort of classically trained economics major. I'm a believer in Adam Smith's invisible hand. Another way of looking at that is the power of the crowd, the wisdom of the crowd. If you let everybody make micro decisions, they will end up bubbling up to become the most efficient macro solution. And I think that's what libertarians believe, but we're not practicing it today in the United States. And to me, that's a big part of the solution of how do we cut the debt. We get rid of a bunch of bureaucrats and we let the market take care of a lot of these social programs.
All right. Well, if someone wants to get more information about your campaign, we've got your Facebook, your website, and X in the video here. How else can someone get a hold of you or find out more?
Yeah, well, and I've also got a YouTube channel. Don't ask me to recite the address of it, but I think you'll put it on there. And then, what I would say is come out, and if you're in the district, come out and see me. Every month, I'm going to be in 12 different locations all over the place. And it's on my website. If you go under the events tab, my calendar is there. And I'm going to really every part of the district every month and meeting as many people as I can. And so come talk to me, have a cup of coffee with me, ask me your hardest questions. When I don't know the answer, I'll tell you, I don't know the answer to that. That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. I was at a farmer's market in Bernie Saturday before last, and somebody came up and started asking me about water rights. And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, to the extent that's a federal problem, I guess I'll have to study up and learn about it. But best I know about water rights in Texas, it's the law of capture, right? If it's underneath your land, you get to have it. But I had to admit that I don't know the answer to everything. I'm not running because I know the answer to everything. I'm running because I have principles, and I will use those principles to study the issues and come up with what I think is the appropriate answer.
Great.
I have a huge ask as a representative of the communications department here.
Uh-huh.
All of those things that you're going to, can you submit them to the LP Texas calendar? So then if someone goes to lptexas.org, they can see that on the calendar also?
So if I just go to the website, it'll Just any person can submit an event.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It has to
Oh,
be.
okay.
It has to
We
be-
have to approve them, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, it's kind of like the second Tuesday and the third Thursday and all that kind of stuff. But if you want me to, I can sit down and take a little time and put it all on there. Yeah.
I would love that because a lot of people like check those to see if there are any events somewhat near them.
And I don't care. I mean, obviously, I'd say if I remember right, 60 or 70% of the voters in this district live right along the boundaries of the district. And so what that means is I'm going to get a whole lot of people who are in the next district, at a bunch of my events. And that's fine because I'm happy to support my fellow libertarians in other races.
Awesome. Well, Amanda, do you have any other questions you want to ask Bob?
No, I think that was the last one. I just really appreciate Bob taking the time during the middle of the day to help us out and answer these questions.
Well,
I'm happy to do it. I appreciate what you guys are doing for us there in LP Texas, and I know that I have an uphill climb against a well-funded opponent, but I think I have the right message, and it's just a matter of getting that message out to enough people. And for sure, people are sick and tired of being sick and tired of what we're getting out of Washington, and so I think we're going to be heard from in this election.
great.
Awesome.
Well, Bob, do you have anything else you want to mention before we head out?
No, I thank you, and I say God bless to everybody. And politics is a contact sport, and it tends to bring out the ugliness in us. And I would say we all need to try to avoid that and be good and kind people to each other and find where we can agree with one another and try not to turn every single disagreement into a war.
All right.
Sure.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Bob. Amanda, thank you again as well. For anybody else who's watching, feel free to tune in to this one. We've got other ones posted on the LP Texas YouTube channel and more to come throughout the campaign season.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.